Hello, everyone. Good afternoon from UK for all the European people. Good evening for all the Japanese, Asia-based people, and good morning for the America-based people from around the world. Like to welcome everybody for the live seminar, WSET Bitesize, Demystifying Sake and Exploration of Asian Brewing Traditions. So, just quickly introduce about the WSET. So the Wine and Spirit Education Trust is the world's leading provider of qualifications and courses in wine, spirits, beer, and sake. WSET has over 50 years experience in designing and delivering education to help both wine professionals and consumer enthusiasts to learn more about wine, spirits, beer, and sake. You can take WSET qualifications in over 70 different countries through networks of more than 800 courses providers. If you are interested in finding out more about embarking WSET journeys, visit wsetglobal.com to find your nearest course provider. So I just wanted to note that this webinar will be recorded and available to watch via WSET Global Events Hub tomorrow, the latest on the YouTube channel. And if you have any questions, there will be a Q&A box, which you'll be able to see it, to post all the questions there, and we'll have some Q&A time later on. So yeah, make sure you're out there. There is some place in the chat. Feel free to write any greetings to everybody attending, but make sure you add your questions to the Q&A box, not the chat. So yeah, great to see everybody from Thailand, Oxford, Tokyo, Vietnam. Wonderful. Great. So just a bit about myself. So this is me, Natsuki Kikuya. I'm in front of the rice field just being cropped after in the autumn time. This is in Hyogo Prefecture. I am a sake samurai, and I'm a WSET sake educator and a senior researcher based in London, UK. And I've been involved with WSET sake development since 2021. So ever since we have launched sake qualification in 2013, we've been counting numbers of the students for level 1, 3, and recently added at level 2 sake qualifications. We have over 20,000 students globally. So I will tell you later on bits about the courses, but please join any of the courses nearby. So we have very exciting news today that many of you already probably seen on the news site, that the sake, the traditional knowledge and skill for sake and shochu making is expected to be included in UNESCO Intangible Cultural Heritage List this December. So there will be some performing arts of No, or kabuki theater, or some Japanese washi, paper making, or washoku, the Japanese traditional cuisine. There are already 22 numbers registered from Japan. And if the sake and shochu makers making technique has been added, it will be 23rd entry. So I think it will be quite interesting to talk about what will be the impact of having this listed on this, and I think it'd be a quite good an opportunity for sake to spread to wider audiences and really getting this traditional method of sake to be understood for wider audiences. So today I wanted to break down what is actual traditional sake making skills and knowledge, and we are breaking down into it's a bite size, so it's only half an hour, but we try to make sure that we cover all these different points that makes the sake quite unique and traditional to Japanese culture. So this sake making has been actually registered by the Japanese government as an important intangible cultural heritage in 2021 already, and they had these requirements for the registration. So I wanted to talk based on this 3 points that's been registered by the Japanese government. So the first thing is steaming rice. So this is including shochu, which is another Japanese national alcoholic drink. It's a spirits from Japan. So if you are talking about shochu, there'll be other ingredients included. But in terms of sake, the main ingredients and the only ingredients we'll use. is rice. So talking about the rice is the first thing. And then second point is Koji. Koji is a type of fungus that's native to Japan. So the second requirement goes to the handmade Koji making using a traditional Koji mold. We'll get more details later on, but you see this beautiful picture of Koji mold growing on the surface of the steamed rice. And the third point is a multiple par fermentation, which is very, very unique to within the all alcoholic drink category. And we'll get to that later on as well. But just talking about this, sake has a history of over 2,000 years. And within all the histories, the techniques and the traditions and method has been evolving year by year. And these 3 points that's been, covering all these sake making techniques has been finalized in Muromachi period, which is about 700 years ago. So even just talking about this, we've been practicing this method for 700 years. That's a quite long history already. So let's start talking about how this steamed rice is being made. So sake is obviously made with the rice as a main ingredients. So it's first start with a selection of the rice. For sake making, the short-grained Japonica style non-sticky rice is ideal to select. You can actually make sake with a table rice, which is a type of rice you eat, in a Japanese restaurant and so on. But for premium sake category, you can also use the sake rice variety that's being developed for sake making purpose. They are called sake-specific rice. And we have over 130 different varieties available today, which has more ideal components, nutrients for sake making, but you have all these selection and choices as a producer. And afterwards, these rice, so they all come with a bran and germ around it as a brown rice. So you have to polish the rice. Traditionally, they'll be only removing a few bits % outer layers. But around over 100 years ago, the Japanese sake industry has been evolving to polish the rice to smaller percentages. So they're removing even more percentage than the few bits. So for example, the table rice we eat in a Japanese restaurant, it's about 6 or 7% taken out, which makes it the polishing ratio. We always communicate with a number that has been remaining to be 94, or 93% of the rice polishing ratio that you eat as a table rice. But for sake making today, we go further degrees. And that would adjust the nutrients of the rice remaining and also the category of the sake. And after rice has been polishing outer layer of the rice grains, we will move on to washing, soaking the rice in water, and also steaming the rice. Washing would help, removing all this dust that's been, spending hours and hours polishing away. So you just clean the rice itself, and then soaking would help the rice to adjust the moisture level. Moving on to steaming, that would help the rice to what we call it gelatinize. So gelatinization is happening of the starch added it with the moisture and the heat that would convert the starch structure. And steaming will help the Koji later on for the steamed rice to penetrate inside of the steamed rice, as well as when they're fermenting in a tank, they're easier to dissolve in the fermentation process as well. So it's an essential process. And just a bit more about polishing. So this is pretty much the rice grain, each grain of the rice from 100% of polishing ratio, which is a brown rice, to be polished down to 70%, so meaning 30% out, 60%, and even going to half away, 50% or even smaller. And by polishing to smaller percentages, what is remaining is the starchy core of the rice. And especially in a sake-specific rice, we call this center of the rice as Shimpaku. Shimpaku is a concentrated starch cores So more you polish, you're revealing this Shimpaku only and removing outside of the rice grain in the end of sperm, which we call it as, which has a protein, vitamin, fats, and other nutrients. So that would actually control the category of the sake. So the, the more elastic polishing entry level of premium sake category, we call it as honjozo junmai, where 60 or 50% remaining, more rice is taken away, more Shimpaku revealed. We call it ginjo or junmai ginjo or daiginjo, junmai daiginjo. And it says on the picture here, sake flavor and style changes. So more you polish, this fruity and floral, delicate flavor profile comes out with lower umami, lower acidity, whereas honjozo junmai, or even the futsushu, which is the ordinary table sake class sake, they have more cereal and lactic flavor profiles. So that was about the rice. Let's move on to the koji. So this is kind of overview that actually the slide we use for the level 2 sake course. That's how the steam rice from the steamer is going to the koji room to be penetrated or propagated with a koji mold spores, and then spending a couple days there to manage the mold growth, and then come out as a koji rice. So when you say koji, it's actually refers to the steam rice that's been propagated with a koji mold or koji kin. And depending on how much you sprinkle, what type of koji you sprinkle, that changes the kind of growth structures and direction of the koji mold on each surface of the grain. That changes the different type of enzyme releasing in the sake. So this is what is koji. You see this beautiful kind of flower blossom picture. This is a microscopic picture of koji mold itself. So as I said earlier, koji is a steam rice propagated with a koji kin or koji mold spores. And koji kin is a native to Japan. It's a type of fungus or type of mold spores. And they're essential for a lot of major Japanese products, such as soy sauce, miso, shochu, and obviously sake. And there are different types, as I mentioned, but they are today it's managed and kind of distributed by some manufacturers in Japan, and sake maker purchase koji kin, koji mold as a packet, and they would sprinkle koji kin by hand at the brewery, like in the picture here. So the master brewer Toji is sprinkling the koji mold spores on top of the steam rice. And the steam rice would spend about 48 to 50 hours within this very special room called koji muro or koji room. So the regular steam rice become koji or koji rice after all these hours. And why koji is important for sake making? So koji provides sugar. So the enzyme that koji releases would help breaking down the starch of the rice into sugar. So they create glucose, which helps sustaining alcohol fermentation. And also it releases amino acid, which contributes to a umami flavor of the sake. So without koji, you cannot make sake. So this is one of the quite proud mold of Japan. We call it koji as a national mold of Japan. I don't think any other country in the world has national mold apart from Japan. So it's a very essential mold that we've been respecting and we've been utilizing for many food manufacturers in Japan. So finally, the third point that what makes sake different to other drink, which is make it traditional, is this multiple parallel fermentation. It's a bit technical stories. This is another slide that we use for level 2 sake qualification, that when you're thinking about alcohol conversion or alcohol fermentation, we always need sugar and yeast. So any alcohol needs sugar and yeast combining together, creating alcohol, ethanol, and carbon dioxide. And in terms of, let's say, wine, where does the sugar coming from? So the grape juice already has containing lots of sugar already. So this natural sugar from the grape juice with the yeast, either added it or, in the nature, would combine together, creating alcohol. So that's a single alcohol fermentation. In terms of beer making, it's more similar to sake because it's grain-based drink. But what the beer making is different to sake making is it's a two-stage fermentation. So the first stage, you convert the wheat or the barley of the beer into malt sugar. So this is a process called germination of the wheat or barley, that you let the barley to sprout. So the germination happens, and when they germinate, it releases an enzyme that would break down the starch of the wheat or barley into sugar. So they'll make this malt sugar first, and then we utilize this malt sugar to help sustaining alcohol fermentation. So almost two steps. When you're talking about sake, it happens simultaneously. So starch to sugar conversion, the rice, starch of the rice that's being propagated with the Koji mold spores, keep releasing a sugar. And this sugar will be consumed with the yeast that's been in the fermentation tank and creating alcohol. So these two, alcohol fermentation, starch conversion, happening simultaneously in one tank, which is one of the very rarest way of fermentation. I know some of the Asian drinks utilize this mold-based multiple power fermentation, but it's only few numbers, and sake is one of the significant one. So in order to keep these two things in balance, it's not as simple. So we have to make sure these two things happens in balance. Not one thing is, running out of each other. That's how we do a stage fermentation. So when you're looking at the way we ferment sake, the ingredients of the sake is you've been told from me that koji, steamed white rice, and then we also add water and yeast. But then instead of adding everything in a one big tank, we start with a smaller fermentation starter. So which is 1/10 of the main tank size, much smaller tank. And around this time, we'll make sure we add the lactic acid or utilize the lactic acid bacteria for Kimoto method of building fermentation starter. So the other bacteria not jumping inside. So after 2 or 4 weeks of spending the starter, so the yeast is multiplied safely, you moving on to the main fermentation. In even main fermentation, we add ingredients in 3 stages over 4 days. So we have to make sure little by little these ingredients are combined together, so these two things, power fermentation, would happen in balance. And after 21 to 35 days, they create quite a lot of alcohol compared to other fermented or brewed drinks, up to 22% ABV max. It's to do with this power fermentation. Koji would continue to provide sugar for the yeast to create alcohol. So that's why sake ended up having a slightly higher alcohol content, and this kind of nice umami flavor, fruity flavor coming from the yeast esters, or some kind of subtle pure flavor profile. So that's the final product. So obviously, what I've been sharing with you today is a very shortcutted version of explanation. And after the fermentation, we obviously have to filter the sake and all this final adjustment and all these little techniques to build the koji or choice of rice, fermentation starter method, fermentation temperature, choice of yeast. There are lots of other options as a producer to practice. So if you wanted to explore more sake with the WSET, we highly recommend you to join us. So we have a level 1, 2, 3 different levels. Level 1 will be quite simple, fun class that happens in one day, and you get to taste 10 or 15 sakes and just immersed into this sake culture. 2 be quite nice advanced course for people who's considering to be in the sake industry, having a little bit more deeper knowledge. That's only multiple choice questions. That's the best part of it. Level 3 is one of the most advanced sake course that involves tasting a numerous number of samples, and also having shortly to answer questions with the blind tasting samples as well. But if you are passing level 3, you can definitely be an expert. Explore more about this and learn about the qualification from the WSET Global website, and I think we put the link on the comment section as well. You can click there from there. So I kept extra 10 minutes for answering everybody's comments or questions. So just wondering if any of you have questions.
Thanks, Natsuki. Yeah, we've got quite a few questions. So we'll just see how many we can get through. So the first question, is brown rice generally unpolished rice, or is it sometimes also a different type of rice?
So brown rice is actually the rice without polishing. So any rice without polishing, we call it brown rice, which has a bran and shells around it. So even different type of rice has a brown rice version. And if you polish even 1% or 2%, rice become white rice. So that's the terminology of brown rice.
Great, thank you. Another one, are there several types of Koji mold, like yeast? Does the type of Koji mold affect the taste of sake?
Yeah, so the one I showed you earlier is the yellow Koji mold pictures in there, and that's the what kind of Koji mold that we use for sake making. For shochu making, or awamori, which is our Okinawan spirits, we use a white or black Kojis, which creates a lot of citric acid, by propagating a white or black Koji mold. For yellow Koji mold, within this yellow Koji mold, there are different varieties of Koji kind of strains that's ideal for soy sauce making or miso making or sake making. And even within the sake making, different company makes different type of strain blends. Some creates much more umami style, some creates a little bit more kind of sugar-driven style. So, you can choose as a producer to, buy a packet or blend your Koji strains to make your own favorite style of Koji.
Great, thank you. Another question. I've heard that Koji originally came to Japan from China. Do you know when and where in Japan it first came to?
So it's actually a very interesting story when you talk about journey of Koji, how they ended up being a national mode of Japan. It's a very romantic story, to be honest. So it's actually started from this kind of beer. The story that I heard was when the kind of the beer making, the malting techniques or germination of the wheat technique has been finalized in Egypt. They've been kind of spread all over the world. One direction went to Europe, the other direction went to Asia. And when this kind of germinating malting techniques is landed in China, they started germinate rice instead of wheat or barley. And then we're practicing alcohol making using this germination rice. And then for some reason, accidentally, somebody, I don't know, there was some flood happened and the rice become moldy. They start utilize this mold to make alcohol. And so they had their original alcohol kind of mold. They call it the block Koji in China. And they still make the yellow wine or Shaoxing wine based on that mold. And I think when that was introduced to Japan, we kind of discovered that we have a different type of mold, which is Aspergillus oryzae, that's the Koji. And we started to utilize this native mold within Japan. And I trust that it's also coming about the Muromachi period, about like 600, 700 years ago. That's the kind of origin of when the Koji kind of started to be utilized in sake making.
Great. And is the lactic acid added in the fermentation starter to regulate the pH, or is that for flavor, or both?
Yes, so it's very interesting that we actually manage the pH level here at the fermentation starter. I mentioned earlier that we add the lactic acid, by hand, the liquid version of the brewer grade lactic acid liquid from manufacturer, or use the lactic acid in bacteria in the nature to attract the lactic acid, creating a lactic acid from the nature. So this is mainly to protect the mash from spoilage. Because at this moment, there's no alcohol being created, and the mash doesn't have enough acidity to protect from spoilage from other wild yeast or other spoilage bacteria as well. So that's why we utilize lactic acid at this stage. For traditional method, Kimoto, so we spend much longer time to build this lactic environment. Its main purpose is to make the safe environment for the yeast to multiply, but it does affect to the final quality. And Kimoto Yamaha method, which creates the natural lactic acid from the nature, has a little bit more creamier, dairy, kind of higher acidity for flavor profiles, which gives a nice depth in flavor profile as well.
Okay. Next question. Given the growing international market for sake as opposed to Japanese domestic markets, could you tell us of new developments in bottle labeling, please? And will this eventually contain more information in local languages?
Oh yeah, the bottle labeling. I think that's very nice topic to talk about when you talk about this kind of spreading Japanese culture, because I think the language barrier is one of the biggest obstacles when you're talking about exporting sake to overseas countries. Unless you're able to read kanji or read Japanese, you won't be able to know what's inside or which category even, or the brand name, so on. So there's no set regulation or set rules, but I know that a lot of Japanese government subsidiary organization has been suggesting sake makers to come up with their own back labels to communicate with the consumers overseas. So they have created some templates like Jetro, the J-Fudo. They all created the template of back labels that they suggested for the sake makers to switch instead of the just very generic small back labels or even Japanese back labels to use, so which covers, let's say, the polishing ratio of the sake or alcohol content, maybe talking about the food pairing elements or drinking temperature, and so on. I think that can be very helpful to communicate with the consumers outside. But nothing has been really controlled much, and it's really up to the distributors, local distributors, to decide what kind of back label they want to use. So it's nice to suggest to these companies also.
Great. I've got time for a couple more. Do we have the term terroir in sake making? Is it possible to recognize sake from two different regions despite the same production method, same type of rice and criteria?
Yeah, so this is actually one of the most frequently asked questions is, does the sake has terroir? Does the sake has any regionality? That's a very common question to be asked. The answer is not as simple as wine. I'll normally say yes and no in different ways. So no is easier to say because knowing that, as you've been seeing, sake is a very technical product, depending on the rice polishing, the choice of Kojis and how you propagate it, and then choice of yeast, the fermentation temperature, really changes the final quality, and it's adjustable as well. So it's not the only rice quality or water quality or Koji quality decides the final quality or style of sake. It's really to do with the skills of the producer. So and also knowing that the fact that rice is quite, compared to grapes, you can easily transport rice to overseas countries or, outside of prefectures. So you can make any kind of sake anywhere, pretty much. I heard that there are about 70 sake makers outside of Japan today, and the number is growing in the past 20 years. So that is kind of one of the being openness of the sake. You can make any type of sake anywhere. But then when you're thinking about the kind of regional culture, if you've been to Japan, I'm sure you are amazed how broad and how wealthy each regional culture represents. So every prefecture has its own specialties and the type of food they represent and kind of signature dishes to enjoy. And also kind of palates, they tend to like sweeter, salted palate or something more delicate. You eat more meat or you eat more seafood, which type of the coast, which side of the coast of Japan Sea or Pacific Ocean changes the type of seafood choices as well. So that really changes the diet, drinking, food, eating culture of each region. So some prefecture has more distinctive, regional styles than the other. I'll represent maybe one significant one is like Hyogo, that has quite firm and rich flavor profile, where Kyoto is more delicate and subtle. Niigata is known for Tanrei Karakuchi, which is light and crisp and dry, very transparent side of sake quality. So, highly recommend you to explore these different types within the different regions as well.
Great, thank you so much, Natsuki. I think that's probably all the questions we have time for today.
Wonderful. Yeah, so thank you so much for earlier. So this video will be shared on the YouTube channel of the WSET, and so make sure you will check them out for some of the missing parts as well. And also, I appreciate you if you be able to do some questionnaires. I think that's going around now. More interesting wine, beer, spirit, and sake qualification, please visit Where to Study page at the WSETglobal.com.